so I challenge you to brainstorm a few different genres that you already are aware of. And we're really going to think about when we pick up a book what the genre might be. If we have an idea of what the genre might be, it'll help us to guide us through that text a little easier because they tend to have the same kinds of characters. Maybe the settings are similar in some way. The plot, they may be going through some events. Maybe the problems are very similar depending on the genre. The theme, we might come across a couple themes that are similar. The structure of the text, how it's put together, and the language the author uses. So we want to really think about first, is this book fiction or nonfiction? And then we can break it down into some different subgenres. So when we try to think about what the genre might be, we're making a claim, and then we're going to find some evidence to see if we can support that claim. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quickly. So again, you can then see what graphic organizer, here it is, that we are going to be filling out. We're not filling this all out today by any means, but you might already have some background knowledge on fantasy or sci-fi, and you'll be able to fill those in, or maybe someone near you has some background knowledge because they love those types of books and they're able to share that with you. So I'm going to bring out the big one. And it's right here. So make sure you're pulling up yours in Schoology, and this is the one you can type on. All right. So we're going to take a look at our core novel today, and our core novel text is obviously fiction since it's a novel. Our informational text that we are reading is nonfiction. So we're going to talk today about this fiction text. We are going to be reading Heat by Mike Lupica. I see that on the front cover, it has a boy throwing baseball. And I know that heat refers to how fast a pitcher can throw or how fast someone can throw in general. And if they're bringing the heat, they throw really well. And then I look on the back side and I have a nice synopsis on the back, which is a go-to place if I want to see if I want to read it or not, right? Gives me information about what the text might be about. It says the arm of a champion. That's the heading of this synopsis. Michael Arroyo has a pitching arm that throws serious heat, but his firepower is nothing compared to the heat Michael faces in his day-to-day life. Newly orphaned, Michael has only his 17-year-old brother, Carlos, for family. If social services hears of their situation, they will be separated in the foster care system. Together, the boys carry on alone, but then someone wonders how a 12-year-old boy could possibly throw with as much power as Michael Arroyo. With no way to prove his age, no birth certificate, and no parent to fight for his cause, Michael's secret world is blown wide open, and he discovers that family can come from the most unexpected sources. Seems pretty realistic, doesn't it? So if I'm looking at my chart here, it seems to be a pretty realistic text. And I know down here we have realistic fiction adventure. I don't kind of hear that he's going on any kind of adventure, like whitewater rafting or jumping out of planes. Realistic horror, I don't hear about anybody dying. And then realistic contemporary, that just means it could take place today, and that kind of sounds like it could happen too. And then I have this one up here in the left corner that says sports fiction. So I know that this involves sports because of the baseball aspect. They talk about him being a thrower. And then when I'm looking at the text features in here, I do see that all of the chapters are numbered and then they have baseballs after it, like that one. See if they have anything in the back of the book. We have a little author bio. We have a couple books that he's also written and a little synopsis of them, and they are all involving sports kids, and that's about it. So I'm gonna make the claim that this is a sports fiction text, and I say that because it involves some sport and I can change this if things do change as I'm reading the book, but the characters seem realistic and the setting. I don't really know much about the setting quite yet. I might get there a little bit later, find out some more info. It seems like he goes through some realistic real life struggles, right? Can people be in a foster care or nervous about a foster care system? Sure. May he have come from another country that makes him the social services. Sorry, he has no birth certificate, no way to fight, no parent to fight. Social services, he's worried about them and going in the foster care system. So this is all real things that could happen to people if their parent dies and they're being raised by an older sibling. So the conflict and plot seems realistic so far. Obviously, we don't know a theme yet, or we haven't read anything to get the language. So we are going to start by reading chapter 1 today of Heat. So let's do some preview of the text first. Get rid of that stop share. All right, before we start reading chapter 1, I just want to show you over here on the map that they're going to be referring to a couple places in New York City. So I want to build some background about that. He talks a lot about Yankee Stadium, and this is where the old stadium was located in the Bronx of New York City. And so right next to it, they're going to be playing. This is where our main character, Michael, is going to be practicing and playing for Little League at Malcolm's Dam Park. So you're going to talk about Jerome Avenue. They're going to be talking about the bridge and some of these major expressways, major roads to get in and out of the Bronx, New York City. And so this gives you kind of a visual of how close and that he could see people coming up to go to the Yankee Stadium and the lines and hear the crowds because he was right there. So let me see, I have another picture here, a real picture. Malcolm's Dam Park. Here are the fields that the kids play on, and they can see the stadium. And then you can see all the people going to the game. All right, to get a feel for his Little League kids getting ready to play. All right. So chapter 1, we're going to read that today in Heat. Let's get started. Mrs. Cora walked slowly up River Avenue in the summer heat, secure within the boundaries of her world. The great ballpark Yankee Stadium was on her right. The blue subway tracks were above her, the tracks colliding up there with the roar of the train as it pulled into the station across the street from the stadium at 161st Street and River. The two constants in my life, Mrs. Cora thought, baseball and the thump, thump, thump of another train, like my own personal rap music. She had her green purse over her arm, the one that was supposed to look more expensive than it really was, the one the boys upstairs had bought for her birthday. Inside the purse, in the bank envelope, was the $100, quick cash, they called it. She had just gotten from the Bank of New York ATM her food money, but she was suddenly too tired to go back to the Imperial Market. That's like a grocery store. Mrs. C, as the kids in her building called her, was preparing for what could feel like the toughest part of her whole day, the walk back up the hill to 825 Girard from the stadium. Now she moved past all of the stores selling Yankees merchandise, Stan Sports World, Stan the Man's Kids and Ladies, Stan the Man's Baseball World, wondering as she did sometimes if there was some famous Yankee who had been named Stan. He hit her from behind. She was in front of Stan's Bar and Restaurant, suddenly falling to her right onto the sidewalk in front of the window as she felt the green purse being pulled from her arm, as if whoever it was didn't care if he took Mrs. Cora's arm with it. Mrs. Cora hit the ground hard, rolled on her side, feeling dizzy, but turning herself to watch this. What? This boy, not much bigger than some of the boys at 825 Girard, watched him sprint down River Avenue as if faster than the train that was right over her head this very minute, pulling into the elevated Yankee Stadium stop. Mrs. Cora tried to make herself heard over the roar of the 4 train. "Stop!" Mrs. Cora said. Then, as loud as she could manage, "Stop! Thief!" There were people reaching down to help her now, neighborhood people, she was sure, voices asking if she was all right, if anything was broken. All Mrs. Cora could do was point toward 161st Street. "My food money," she said, her voice cracking. Then a man's voice above her was yelling, "Police!" Mrs. Cora looked past the crowd, starting to form around her, saw a policeman come down the steps from the subway platform, saw him look right at her, and then the flash of the boy making a left around what she knew was the far outfield part of the stadium. The policeman started running too. The thief's name was Ramon. He was not the smartest 16-year-old in the South Bronx, not even close to being the smartest, mostly because he had always treated school like some sort of hobby. He was not the laziest, either. This he knew, because there were boys his age who spent much more time on the street corner and sitting on the stoop than he did. But he was lazy enough, and hated the idea of work even more than he hated the idea of school, which is why he preferred to occasionally get his spending money stealing purses and handbags, like the Hulk green one he had in his hand right now. Can you picture that color green like Hulk? As far as Ramon could tell at this point in his life, the only real job skill he had was this: he was fast. He had been a young soccer star of the neighborhood in his early teens, just across the way on the fields of Joseph Yancey Park. Those fields a blur to him right now as he ran on the sidewalk at the back end of Yankee Stadium on his way to the cobblestone of Rupert Place, which ran down towards home plate. "Stop! Police!" Ramon heard from behind him. He looked around, saw the fat cop starting to chase him, wobbling like a car with a flat tire. Hear that simile? Can you picture that? Fat chance, Ramon thought. Ramon's plan was simple. He would cut across Rupert Place and run down the hill to Maccomb's Dam Park, across the basketball courts there, then across the green expanse of the outfield that the 2 ball fields shared there. Then he would hop the fence at the far end of Maccomb's Dam Park and run underneath the overpass for the exit from the Deegan Expressway, one of the stadium's exits. And then Ramon would be gone, working his way back toward the neighborhoods to the north with all their signs pointing toward the George Washington Bridge, finding a quiet place to count his profits and decide which girl he would spend them on tonight. "Stop! I mean it!" the fat cop yelled. Ramon looked over his shoulder, saw that the cop was already falling behind, trying to chase and yell and speak into the walkie-talkie he had in his right hand all at once. It made Ramon want to laugh his head off even as he ran. No cop had ever caught him, and no cop ever would, unless they had begun recruiting Olympic sprinters for the New York Police Department. He imagined himself as a sprinter now, felt his arms and legs pumping, thought of the old Cuban sprinter his father used to tell him about. Juan something? No. Wantanera. Alberto Wantanera. His father said it was like watching a god run, and his father, the old fool, wasn't even Cuban, he was Dominican. The only Dominican who wanted to talk about track stars instead of baseball? Whatever. Ramon ran now across the street Across the green grass of Macklem's Dam Park, where boys played catch in the July morning, ran toward the fence underneath the overpass. It wasn't even noon yet, Ramon thought, and I've already earned a whole day's pay. He felt the sharp pain in the back of his head in that moment, like a rock hitting him back there. Then Ramon went down like somebody had tackled him from behind. What the? Ramon, who wasn't much of a thinker, tried to think of what had just happened to him, but his head hurt too much. Then he went out. Hmm. I wonder what did that. Knocked him and then made him go out. Hmm. Notice how this book so far, it's definitely not written in first person, but it is third person, and we're getting a lot of thoughts and feelings from the characters. So it might be an omniscient narrator, one that knows the thoughts and feelings of all characters. When the thief opened his eyes, his hands were already cuffed and in front of him. The fat policeman stood with a tall, skinny boy with long arms and long fingers attached to them, wearing a Yankees t-shirt and a baseball glove under his arm. What's your name, kid? The one on the ground said, Ramon, thinking the policeman was talking to him. The cop looked down as if he'd forgotten Ramon was there. Wasn't talking to you. Michael, the skinny boy said. Michael Arroyo. Ah, now we're getting introduced to our main character. And you're telling me you got him with this from home plate? What do you think he's holding? The cop held up a baseball that looked older than the old stadium that rose behind them to the sky. Got lucky, I guess, Michael said. The cop smiled, rolling the ball around in his hand. You lefty or righty? Now Michael smiled and held up his left hand like he was a boy with the right answer in class. Home plate to dead center, the cop said. Michael nodded, like now the cop had come up with the right answer. You got some arm, kid, the cop said. That's what they tell me, Michael said. We're going to stop there for a moment. Boy, I'm really going to like this book. I really like sports fiction text. And I noticed that I showed you the setting information. So the setting is a real place. And I'm going to add that to my graphic organizer as well. So as you're reading the books that you selected today during Reader's Workshop, see if you can figure out what genre it might be. And then think about what you know about books in that genre. So think about your characters. Think about the settings of those books, those types of books. Think about the plot. Think about the language being used, the theme. And then we're going to use that so that when we pick up a genre, we already have a heads up of what kind of how it's structured, what's it going to sound like and look like. All right, guys. All right, enjoy your Reader's Workshop time.